Niccolo Machiavelli grasped a single, merciless truth that the majority of minds still violently refuse. The human spirit does not rebel against commands because of logic, but because of raw animal instinct. Issue a direct order and pride instantly transforms into your adversary. Offer obedience as though it were a voluntary selection, and vanity quietly enlists as your most loyal lieutenant. What follows is the refined, almost invisible craft that springs from this observation, the devastating elegance of reverse psychology, the instrument through which one pilots the wills of others while remaining unseen, the mechanism that allows absolute dominion to masquerade as perfect liberty. Imagine the scenario. You require a specific action, a loyalty shift, a decision tilted in your favor. Direct request would only awaken opposition. The ordinary mind is convinced that resistance equals autonomy. What it fails to perceive is that every act of defiance merely reconfirms the very influence it claims to reject. He recognized this pattern half a millennium ago, yet it continues to operate in the contemporary psyche with the reliability of physical law. If you wish others to travel toward your destination, first grant them the comforting fiction that they hold the compass. Permit them to imagine they chart their own voyage, while you silently determine the stars by which they navigate. That is the core of influence that leaves no fingerprints. You issue no command. Choice itself becomes your concealment. Tell a person, decide however you see fit, and observe how their ego compels them to select precisely the path you prepared, because anything less would threaten their cherished narrative of self-determination. When a prince sought fidelity, he never bellowed for it across gilded chambers. Instead, he rendered disloyalty appear ruinous, disgraceful, suicidal. Men and women do not embrace submission, they merely flee the optics of treason. The consummate manipulator never compels obedience. He sculpts the landscape so that every route of escape circles back to his feet. This is the inaugural doctrine of real mastery. Liberty is the most unbreakable chain. The instant someone feels unchained, their behavior becomes clockwork. The second doctrine is the forbidden fruit principle. Forbid something categorically, and you anoint it with irresistible allure. Declare an idea perilous, and hands will clutch it until their palms blister. Brand a notion heretical, and it instantly acquires the glow of sanctity. He perceived that prohibition is the ultimate aphrodisiac. If you desire someone to adopt your scheme, first paint it as reckless, scandalous, or verboten. The soul hungers for transgression, because transgression flatters autonomy. Therefore, you supply the very rebellion you secretly scripted. They will champion it with religious fervor, precisely because it masquerades as emancipation, and in their crusade for sovereignty they become the unwitting agents of your architecture. The third weapon is the faint suggestion. Never demand, never press. Authentic persuasion hides inside apparent nonchalance laced with quiet certainty. When you project relaxed doubt yet unshakable composure, others rush forward to finish your sentence. Utter, it probably isn't ideal, though it could succeed. And instead of defensiveness, you ignite intrigue. Human beings resent being instructed what to think, yet they delight in demonstrating their own brilliance. Sketch the bare silhouette of your objective and allow their vanity to color inside the lines. Before long, they will passionately defend the very conclusion you embedded, convinced it originated in their own superior insight. Every syllable they pronounce was yours, they merely voiced the echo. He sometimes referred to this as the mirror echo, the technique of gently refracting another's notion until the original source vanishes from memory. When they propose delay, you respond, "Indeed, patience would make us appear more sagacious." The words glide under their rational radar. They register agreement, yet the frame has imperceptibly tilted. Later they will repeat your distortion as though it were their private discovery. Reverse psychology flourishes in these minute dislocations, imperceptible, deniable, yet devastatingly complete. Then arrives the magnetism of detachment. Nothing pulls more powerfully than visible unconcern. When you seem impervious, others scramble to recapture equilibrium by winning your regard. Indifference constitutes the supreme lever because, say, it transfers the emotional labor onto them. Cease pursuit and pursuit begins. Refuse to react and they question the source of your serenity. That is why he greeted compliments with silence and rebuffs with tranquility. The less he disclosed, the more desperately others projected their longings onto the blank canvas he provided. Across every palace intrigue, every diplomatic chessboard, he conditioned people to interpret his favor as evidence of their own excellence. They labeled it charisma. It was arithmetic. Once you teach others to calibrate their self-worth by your nod or your absence, the mere withdrawal of attention becomes a silent scepter. The sixth instrument is the inverted menace. Inferior minds threaten because they dread losing. Superior minds relinquish the appearance of threat in order to sow disorientation. Declare calmly, act as you judge proper, I will manage accordingly, and resistance unexpectedly turns inward. They anticipated fury, they encounter poise. They anticipated domination, they encounter vacancy. In that void, their imagination conjures penalties far harsher than any verbal lash you could have delivered. Mortal composure in the face of intended provocation exposes the fragility of the provocateur. After silence arrives contemplation. After contemplation arrives the mirror snare. When you reflect not their logic but their emotional frequency, soft when they roar, measured when they accuse, receptive when they suspect, they experience being understood rather than opposed. Trust germinates not from intellectual alignment, but from sympathetic vibration. He handled this like a polished obsidian mirror held in shadow. Once they recognized their own likeness in him, redirection became effortless. They mistook his guidance for the voice of their private integrity. Yet the sharpest edge of psychological sovereignty is what he termed the self-portrait barb. Every individual, regardless of station or arrogance, carries within them an idealized avatar they would raise empires to protect. You never command the flesh, you summon the idol. Whisper to the arrogant, you are ordinarily far too perceptive to miss such an obvious point, and ego will scramble to repair the oversight. Inform the doubter, you are far too rational to let sentiment cloud your judgment, and he will strangle his own intuition to remain consistent with the flattering portrait. In each instance, you govern not the individual but the sacred effigy he venerates. You rule through expectation masquerading as compliment. Now the eighth, the seed fracture. No dialectic overpowers a solitary, unanswered interrogation. When conviction proves immovable, do not assault it. Merely introduce tremor. Ask softly, are you entirely certain that sequence is accurate? Or murmur, fascinating. Others described it quite differently. Confrontation hardens, gentle fracture dissolves. Doubt, once planted, metastasizes. It consumes certainty from within until fatigue renders your perspective the path of least resistance. Then the art of tactical capitulation, the feigned collapse. When you deliberately yield, pride relaxes its guard. Pretend agreement and secret spill. He would retreat precisely far enough to permit adversaries their moment of jubilation. Victory induces blindness. Into that blindness influence pours like water into cracked stone. Offer verbal concession once, and observe how suspicion melts. They now hunger for your continued approval because they have already tasted supremacy over you. That hunger is your invisible reign. The 10th principle is stark contrast. Cognition cannot evaluate in vacuum. It requires opposition to perceive value. To render your proposal appear enlightened, juxtapose it against evident folly. To render your course appear secure, inflate the peril of every alternative. Statesmen still erect dynasties upon this device. They conjure pandemonium to vend tranquility, manufacture dread to vend protection. He discerned that allegiance, harmony, cohesion are not products of evidence. They are reflexes to terror choreographed with care. Then the silence discipline. Language diffuses power, silence compresses it. Most individuals speak to relieve tension, inadvertently exposing vulnerabilities, motives, fractures. Remain reticent, and others fill the vacuum with projections, wisdom, menace, enigma. He discovered that the first to pause in dialogue invariably triumphs, not through eloquence, but through the opponent's frantic need to decode the quiet. The more desperately they attempt to decipher you, the more completely they inhabit your orbit. Contemplation itself becomes surrender. The 12th is the inversion of pursuit. Authority erodes the moment you chase. It compounds when pursuit reverses. Abandon the quest for affirmation. Instead, cultivate the perception that your presence is indispensable. He achieved this through calculated utility, rendering his perspective, his equanimity, his counsel a prerequisite for success. He feigned modesty concerning his own value, while quietly linking others' fortunes to his participation. Dependence was mistaken for devotion. Once reliance took root, severance became self-annihilation. Finally, the 13th, provocative defiance. The most irresistible summons is not benevolence but the gauntlet. Declare, you would never grasp this, and they will immolate themselves, proving comprehension. Whisper, you are likely too sentimental for such clarity, and they will straitjacket emotion to disprove you. Pride is the fulcrum no syllogism can resist. A single barbed characterization compels action that directly serves your hidden design while appearing to refute your insult. Yet beneath these 13 blades rests one sovereign axiom. Vanity reigns humanity more tyrannically than terror or cupidity. Vanity compels rejection of counsel, pursuit of applause, performance of independence, self-immolation in the name of appearing sovereign. To harness vanity you do not shatter it. You nourish it judiciously, like kindling that warms fingers while devouring the timber beneath. Every act of influence commences at the precise point where vanity commences, in the comforting mirage of self-rule. The world baptizes it free will. He named it the grand theater of direction, when you abandon overt command and instead construct the theater in which choices appear spontaneous. Resistance ceases to be an enemy. You become its playwright. Recall how often another's feigned indifference drew you into chase. Recall how frequently a superior permitted you to choose what had already been decided. Recall how many convictions you embraced, believing them birthed in your own mind. These are not accidents. They are the delicate signatures of unseen authorship. Once the pattern reveals itself, your reflexes evolve. You cease debating, you cease selling, you reflect, you plant, you fade behind the drapery. Genuine mastery demands self-erasure. The puppeteer conceals the filaments. He permits the marionette to believe its leaps are spontaneous. The quintessence of reverse psychology is direction without visibility. You engineer an ambiance, an unseen current that draws conduct inexorably toward your blueprint while preserving the sensation of sovereignty. It is not trickery, it is cartography. You draft conviction the way architects draft cathedrals, scaffolding invisible, splendor inevitable. Yet this discipline exacts rigor. The instant control becomes percept. Evil, it evaporates. The moment guidance is sensed, revolt ignites. That is why he declared the supreme sovereign rules as though rule were unnecessary. Authority that proclaims itself summons insurrection. Authority that conceals itself endures. He understood that ruin itself can shelter beneath consent. Convince others they defend their liberty, and they will fortify your citadel as though it were their personal sanctuary. Persuade them they rebel, and they will march in flawless formation. Reverse psychology is not sleight of hand, it is recognition of congenital blindness. The mind shields vanity, not verity, autonomy, not rationality. That is why he avoided confrontation. He reframed. When challenged, he posed interrogation rather than declaration. Questions are stealth edicts. They provoke motion without friction, because the mind that responds believes it still authors the response. Power is never wrested. It is extended by invitation. To perfect this art, one must relinquish the lust for visible triumph. The conspicuous conqueror becomes a bullseye. The unseen architect becomes timeless. He recognized that apparent innocuousness grants invulnerability. Permit underestimation, it purchases negligence. He wrote that the gravest threat wears the mask of modesty. Aggression provokes defense. Humility disarms vigilance. When adversaries believe you lack agenda, they cease monitoring your movements. And in that lapse you thread fate. This is the austere beauty of reverse psychology. Its brilliance resides not in deception but in acuity. You do not alter individuals, you alter their self-conception. Once they perceive what they yearn to perceive, perception itself ceases. Every maneuver, every murmur, every withheld gesture originates in this recognition. Control is never extracted through violence. It is bestowed through conviction. And conviction is the simplest substance to mold. Once you comprehend how brittle the human craving for sovereignty truly is, the mirage of agency is not psychological slate. It is the structural beam of every society. Every sovereign, every paramour, every subtle operator who ever wielded lasting ascendancy has done so by permitting others to believe their conduct was uncoerced. He apprehended this truth generations before the discipline bore its modern name. Humanity covets the sensation of liberty far more ardently than liberty itself. They will forsake ease, coherence, even existence to defend the fiction that their volitions are sovereign. When he required allegiance, he never extorted it. He engineered conditions in which disloyalty appeared idiotic and fidelity appeared shrewd. Brilliance lay not in coerced submission, but in rendering rebellion synonymous with self-harm. That is how you reign without pronouncing a single imperative. Those who aspire to conduct others must master indirection rather than declaration. You steer through inquiry, never edict. Would patience perhaps prove more strategic? Would preliminary examination appear more judicious? These locutions seem innocuous, yet each erects invisible guardrails. They fabricate the enclosure within which the phantom of option flourishes. The recipient feels emancipated because they select among pathways, never grasping that every route terminates at your predetermined coordinate. Master the perimeter, and the individual requires no further mastery. That is the occult frame, the unseen architecture of imperceptible sovereignty. Humans respond to nomenclature instinctively. Label one avenue valorous and another foolhardy, and they will crawl toward the term that burnishes their self-regard. Coercion breeds antagonists. Nomenclature breeds acolytes. This is soft power distilled, reality defined so delicately that even antagonism advances your cause. He never engaged in verbal combat. He designed the arena in which combat occurred. Within that design, every apparent victory became another measured step in his choreography. The manufactured polarity is forged from the same material. To the naive observer, it resembles strife. To the architect, it is concord veiled as discord. You cultivate two camps, nourish each with distinct incentives, permit collision, all while guiding both vectors toward your concealed terminus. They imagine they oppose you. In reality, they propel you. Reverse psychology flourishes on dichotomy. The greater the expenditure of defiance, the more rigid the predictability. Those convinced they rebel cannot conceive they are conducted. He understood that overt persuasion belongs to novices. Elegant resistance, that courteous invitation to disobey, folds minds more completely. Command a multitude not to gaze, and every neck cranes. Murmur, this is beyond your comprehension. An inquisitiveness ignites. The ego cannot endure restriction. To propose limitation is to kindle fixation upon transgression. The ego snare emerges from identical mechanics. To govern ego, nourish identity. Inform a man he is rational, and he will enter his passions to honor the designation. Inform a woman she is perceptive, and she will silence every misgiving that challenges the accolade. Praise acuity, and you inherit its selective blindness. Ego will undermine itself to preserve its cherished likeness. He remarked that the swiftest path to fidelity is compelling someone to demonstrate it. Value attaches only to what exacts cost. When you solicit sacrifice through disguised flattery, devotion arrives voluntarily, perceived as autonomous election. The art resides not in seizure but in engineering the instant when surrender feels triumphant. That is the statute of absence. Withdraw regard, affection, endorsement and hunger materializes. Humanity cannot abide emotional void. They hasten to replenish it. The adept strategist masters calibrated retreat, vanishing sufficiently to kindle longing, never sufficiently to forfeit gravitational pull. You disappear from view yet remain embedded in cognition. Every silence becomes a hook, every pause a reflective surface in which others search for self. Absence becomes sovereignty. Next arrives orchestrated inconsistency. Predictability soothes. Soothing breeds indolence. To preserve ascendancy, you must remain indecipherable. Display warmth. Then frost. Extend aid, then equivocation. Sustain uncertainty and others labor to decode you, binding themselves to your cadence through their own analysis. The erratic are revered, scrutinized, feared. The predictable are disregarded. Caution, excessive oscillation breeds distrust. Subtlety is the razor's apex. He navigated it via partial veracity. Always blend candor with calculation, passion with reserve. Permit authenticity sufficient radiance to render cunning credible. Complete fabrication repels. Admixture seduces. When genuineness and artifice entwine inextricably, separation becomes impossible, even for the weaver. Another stratum conceals inverted craving. Never pursue the genuine object of desire. Render it onerous, wearisome, beneath pursuit. Feign indifference toward what you covet, and others begin coveting on your behalf. Seek admiration. Conduct yourself as though it inconveniences. Desire authority. Appear reluctant to exercise it. Paradox defines instinct. We crave resistance, devalue capitulation. Liberty feels numinous only when menaced. The identical law governs attention and longing. Withdraw either and you become singular. Pursue either and both dissolve. Then the surrendered conviction, confronted by intransigent belief, never dispute, amplify concurrence. Excessive agreement provokes unease. Declare you are indubitably correct. No possible question, and the hollow ring of their certainty reverberates. They retreat from their own fortress under its weight. Opposition never occurred. Their arrogance performed the takedown. That is psychological leverage, redirecting momentum until the adversary topples himself. Silence, feigned capitulation, and exquisite timing interlace into what he termed gradual recession. You dispense validation steadily, praise, focus, cordiality, then retract without prelude. The withdrawal resounds louder than any affront. They dissect every syllable, every expression, hunting the fault that provoked the alteration. Uncertainty transmutes into reliance. The more desperately they seek clarification, the more irrevocably they descend into your field. At its zenith, reverse psychology does not dictate conduct, it dictates fixation. When another cannot expel you from thought, directive becomes superfluous. Yet he cautioned that dominion over others commences with dominion over self. The manipulator, enslaved to vanity, becomes victim of his own artifice. Tactics employed for ego gratification devour their wielder. Performance turns inward. Authority evaporates the instant one believes the mask. Authentic influence is not fabrication, it is exactitude. It is perception of the unseen scaffolding of vanity and dread that animates every human gesture. Once perceived, coercion becomes redundant. You cease compelling, you commence configuring. You cease contending for supremacy. You permit momentum to carry others into your geometry. This is gravitational influence, unseen, ceaseless, frictionless. You do not hunt power, you become its natural locus. He recognized that most conduct springs not from liberty but from concealed scripting, infantile conditioning, societal mirrors, affective obligations. Reaction is mistaken for volition. Once this is apprehended, persuasion ceases to be linguistic. It becomes environmental, the mute realignment of incentives and sentiments until others drift toward the intended terminus. When individuals believe themselves emancipated, they become most pliable. When convinced they rebel, they become most foreseeable. When persuaded they manipulate you, they have already yielded. The most exquisite expression of reverse psychology is liberality. You bestow not to delight, but to fetter. You proffer liberty not to emancipate, but to study utilization. Few suspect benevolence because manipulation is measured in antagonism, never generosity. Yet the most elegant snares are upholstered in comfort. He deployed this frequently, a public kindness concealing private obligation. The beneficiary recalls the boon, never the invisible tariff. Gratitude crystallizes into fidelity before debt registers. This is the umbral favor, control masquerading as magnanimity. When detachment is perfected, every action amplifies. The tranquil man, the reticent tactician, the figure untouched by haste, he commands regard without exertion. Humanity detects assurance through immobility. The vociferous appear frail. The serene become the reflecting pool in which others confront their turble. Hence, they gravitate toward him for anchorage, never perceiving that by seeking stability they confer power. This is the bestowal of authorship. Grant others nominal ownership, and they will defend your framework as their personal invention. When you desire execution of your design, permit minor alteration. Allow them to imprint their signature upon it. Once initialed by ego, they will protect it unto death. The psyche safeguards what it believes it originated. Armies become unnecessary when you command attribution. Then the inverted vulnerability. Strategic confession is armament. Acknowledge a harmless deficiency to purchase confidence. Details escape me. I depend upon your exactitude. In that admission you exalt them. Neutralize suspicion. Quietly delegate responsibility. They will exceed expectation to compensate for your professed shortcoming. In preserving your image, they advance your agenda. Authenticity becomes concealment. Modesty becomes ambush. He frequently enacted the calibrated underdog, appearing overmatched, tentative, modest. It lowers defenses. Once complacency settles, impact lands with multiplied force. Every adversary who discounts you is already partially vanquished. Surprise magnifies potency tenfold. Reverse psychology in command is never perpetual ascendancy. It is temporal ascendancy. Display strength parsimoniously, and each revelation reverberates. A solitary decisive gesture from an assumed harmless figure generates reverence. Repetition desensitizes. Timing sanctifies. Next arrives transference of onus. Confronted by contention, return the burden of demonstration. You may be correct. Perhaps I err. Their compulsion to affirm intelligence will compel them to persuade themselves you are right. The more vigorously they dispute, the more deeply they commit. Voluntary advocacy renders them unconscious partisans. He exercised this in assemblies and negotiations, yielding rhetorically while conquering psychologically. Those who believed they bested him became his unwitting heralds, then delayed counterstroke. Not every provocation merits immediate reply. When defiance is anticipated, offer stillness. Permit duration to erode certitude. Days later, uncertainty infiltrates. Your non-resistance renders their position suspect. Humanity anticipates friction to conclude conflict. When friction never materializes, the mind fabricates it internally. That self-inflicted abrasion becomes your silent conquest. Silence constitutes the strategist's oratory. Impatience belongs to the novice. A solitary hesitation can dismantle 1,000 assertions. He wielded quiet as others wielded legions. Courtiers dreaded his reticence more than his declarations because silence forced them to listen to themselves, and in that echo they discovered culpability. Let us revisit the mirror, for its profundity exceeds mere tonal mimicry. Reflecting values surpasses reflecting affect. When you echo another's moral climate, their equity, intellect, compassion, they recognize self in you. Trust erupts spontaneously because self-resemblance simulates comprehension. Once confidence solidifies, you may redirect conscience as effortlessly as channeling a river whose bed you surveyed. They pursue their own axioms, unaware you drafted them. The inverted ultimatum builds upon this. When confronted by disloyalty or defiance, never implore restraint. Declare with serenity. Pursue what you deem correct. You deprive aggression of opposition by withholding opposition. They anticipated desperation. They encounter equanimity. Now they must rationalize rebellion against one who extended permission. Most fracture beneath the disparity. Dominion migrates in quiet. Then the veiled inversion. When ferocity is expected, extend magnanimity. When recompense is anticipated, offer distance. Unpredictability unmoors. Humans anchor to regularity. Fracture regularity, and they pursue equilibrium through your favor. That pursuit constitutes the silent engine of attachment. He employed it among intimates. One day acclaim, the next withdrawal. They never knew whether to dread or idolize. In that indeterminacy they conformed. At moments deliberate forfeiture, the sacrificial offering. Cede a claim. Permit another to bask. They will regard you harmless. Yet their exaltation binds them. Gratitude transmutes into leverage. Most suspect hostility, never self-effacement. When ambition appears absent, ambition operates unhindered behind the curtain. Power that shrouds itself proliferates. Power that broadcasts itself perishes beneath its own glare. He maintained this equilibrium instinctively, knowing precisely when to vanish, when to manifest, when to recede. Each absence, each postponement, each pause constituted a line inscribed in sympathetic ink, legible only to those already ensnared, and through every layer runs the ultimate ordinance. Emotion dictates perception, yet absence dictates emotion. Withdraw warmth and imagination renders it more luminous than presence ever could. Stillness magnifies presence. Reticence generates captivation. Dominion requires no volume. It requires withholding. When others compose your likeness from their projections, you gov. Earn their reality. They interpret gesture as significance, pause as profundity. In truth, you remain unmoved. That is influence purified, when the external world completes your image. Reverse psychology, then, transcends manipulation. It is psychological redirection, the art of channeling another's momentum until it collapses into congruence with your intent. You never oppose force. You align with it, curve it, permit it to dismantle itself. He never truly misled. He exposed how eagerly people mislead themselves. That is supreme craftsmanship, allowing others to ensnare themselves in preferred illusions, yet the ultimate refinement of the art lies in transcendence. Once pride is comprehended so thoroughly, the need to manipulate evaporates. Reaction ceases. You become mute gravity, composed, inexorable. At that elevation, absence wields greater authority than presence ever could. Opinion is solicited without solicitation. Calm is mirrored, restraint imitated, stillness depended upon, without conscious recognition. You exert influence not through declaration but through being. That is the silent diadem he evoked. Power that neither proclaims, nor defends, nor pursues. The variety that reshapes the chamber without displacement, governs without utterance, molds destiny invisibly while others remain convinced they molded it. When that plane is attained, when the cosmos begins orbiting your tranquility rather than your clamor, you no longer manipulate. You architect. You no longer pursue try, oomph. You embody it, to conduct existence without detection. That is the final aspiration of ascendancy. He apprehended this. When control becomes indiscernible, opposition vanishes. When mind believes it acts autonomously, obedience masquerades as liberation. The consummate strategist never constricts grasp. He releases it, and existence clings in his stead. Contemporary humanity has forsaken this discipline. It pursues visibility like a mendicant pursues currency. It confuses decibels with potency, exposure with legitimacy. Yet authentic influence never demanded spotlight. It demands exactitude, forbearance, stillness. He understood the reticent sovereign outlasts the clamorous conqueror because chains provoke revolt, while gravity inspires worship. Gravity issues no decree, it attracts. It utters no command, it sculpts. The most lethal variety of power is mistaken for inevitability. That is the consummation of reverse psychology, not artifice, but natural law. You render submission feel indigenous. You render capitulation feel elective. You render your architecture indistinguishable from instinct. Observe how fiercely humans defend convictions they believe self-generated. Once committed, they would rather perish than acknowledge external authorship. You need never govern the corporeal, only the vanity, and vanity yields most completely when convinced it remains sovereign. He declared leadership concerns not armies but appearances. To appear innocuous grants entry everywhere. To appear modest elicits every confidence. Postured strength invites contest. Projected humility invites credence, and credence, once secured, relocates kingdoms. The unsophisticated dread deception as dishonor. The strategist regards deception as reflection, the practice of displaying what others long to behold until they disclose their authentic nature. You do not deceive from malice. You deceive to perceive, and through perception you govern. Consider the paradox. Apparent concession renders you unassailable. Visible unconcern unsettles every preconception. Uttering "do as you deem fit" forces confrontation with vanity, dread, craving for affirmation. They believe victory theirs. Yet the sole entity that truly disintegrates is their autonomy. This is reversal's concealed elegance, authority through vacancy, dominion through composure, guidance through echo. Most never perceive it because they hunger for spectacle. They equate power with conflagration, imperative, clamor. Yet he knew excessive noise signals fragile substratum. Strength requiring proof is already decomposing. Authentic power carries zero disquiet. It defends nothing because it already saturates everything. That is why he cultivated serene presence, the mute tension that curves others without articulation. Composure, measured regard, deliberate quiet. These are the media through which supremacy respirates. They are not theater, they are structure. Across epochs, those who molded fate shared one attribute: restraint. Restraint to permit revelation. Restraint to allow chaos to weave the pattern foreseen. Restraint to permit vanity to annihilate adversaries without personal intervention. The multitude mistakes inaction for frailty. The strategist recognizes it as patience. The deliberate braiding of inevitability. To master reverse psychology is to master patience disguised as potency. You cease chasing responses, you study them. You permit others to rush toward definition, knowing each definition constructs their self-imposed prison. Every supposition blinds them further to intention. The more assured they grow in comprehension, the more completely they misapprehend. And when the instant ripens, when expectation has hardened into false certainty, you act once. One gesture, one resolution, one motion so precise it feels predestined. That is Machiavellian tempo, prolonged quiet, concise impact, perpetual resonance. He understood terror fades, fascination endures. To frighten drives flight, to intrigue compels pursuit. Reverse psychology at apogee is enchantment, the slow mesmerism of cognition until curiosity and allegiance become indistinguishable. If you would outmaneuver all, do not dominate, design. Construct the reality in which others believe themselves sovereign, while every selection conforms to your geometry. You cease being participant. You become the contour of the field. The authentic Machiavellian does not contend with opponents. He contends with visibility. He erases himself from the chronicle until only consequence remains. Every triumph must resemble accident. Every result must appear organic unfolding. The world glorifies fortune because it cannot detect exactitude. And when you vanish from sight, an extraordinary phenomenon occurs. Adversaries begin executing your blueprint in your absence. That is mastery transcended, where authority no longer requires attendance and strategy becomes ambiance. He termed it sovereignty of perception. Shape how you are regarded, and action requires no further intervention. Perception authors conduct. Display composure, they infer competence. Display humility, they infer security. Display detachment, they infer profundity. You need only sustain the likeness until they adopt it. Yet this potency carries solitude. The more imperceptible you become, the deeper isolation follows. Influence estranges. The strategist cannot crave comprehension, for comprehension unveils him. If you would perceive what others cannot, you must tread where others will not. Power fundamentally concerns not victory but invariance, remaining unaltered while others reconfigure around you. That is why his intellect outlived empires. He distinguished control from attachment. The manipulator clings to result. The master detaches. Detachment is not apathy, it is lucidity. You perceive without refraction. You move without recoil. You become impervious to emotional clamor that enslaves lesser intellects. People dread the detached because they cannot be maneuvered. Detachment is invulnerability, when nothing possesses you, not esteem, not rancor, not affirmation. Everything yields to you. That is psychological equilibrium, the individual least requiring control exercises. It absolutely, reverse psychology, when distilled, ceases being manipulation of others. It becomes mastery of self. It commences externally, concludes internally. You silence personal impulse, personal necessity to assert. You comprehend that authority over others is merely shadow of authority over reaction. Once that is achieved, language becomes elective. Your mere presence motive. Ease, tone, decision, assurance, without explanation. Restraint becomes orientation. Indifference becomes calibration. And through this mute orbit you grasp why he never raised voice. Because articulated command is command relinquished. The sovereign who must remind others of supremacy has already forfeited it. Genuine authority does not proclaim. It emanates. To apprehend reverse psychology completely, one must ultimately forsake the concept of manipulation as falsehood. It is refinement, the capacity to navigate human emotional turbulence with geometric precision. You do not falsify. You redirect. You do not subjugate. You configure. You do not vanquish. You engineer inevitability. Observation, not malice, propels the strategist. It is recognition that most exist inside self-constructed mirrors, reacting to reflections rather than substance. To conduct them, you must enter the reflection. Address vanity, they hear sagacity. Address fear, they hear sanctuary. Address pride, they hear liberty. He erected empires not through legions but through syntax. He curved monarchs not with menace but with alternatives. His sovereignty resided not in demand, but in permission granted to self-conception. That is why his shadow persists. Language evolves. Instinct does not. Vanity still adjudicates. Ego still occludes. Liberty still enslaves. Every age rediscovers his instruments, believing them novel. Reverse psychology endures because it is not method. It is the physiology of vanity. Every mind resists sovereignty, yet craves guidance. Between those contrary currents power resides. Therefore, if you aspire to command without command, influence without residue, mastery without silhouette, you must master what he mastered, the orchestration of pride. Grant it expanse, nourish its illusion, reflect its image. It will prostrate itself, convinced it bows to none. Do not pursue control. Radiate it. Do not dispute. Frame. Do not demonstrate. Withdraw. Permit others to articulate the conviction you embedded, naming it epiphany. Permit them to defend the phantom of liberty while you navigate its unseen passages. Ultimately, existence belongs not to those who vocalize will, but to those who cause others to vocalize it. Not to those who battle for supremacy, but to those who dissolve the necessity of battle. And when you have perfected that, when conduct flows uncompelled, when silence wields greater authority than speech ever could, when absence governs more completely than presence, then you will comprehend what he comprehended. That supreme domination is tranquility. That purest manipulation is comprehension. That truest triumph is vanishing behind the illusion of volition, while every trajectory still converges upon you. Now you perceive the architecture, not the clamor of power, but the stillness sustaining it. The question is no longer whether you will employ it. The question is how. Because every soul manipulates, most do so blindly, few do so deliberately, and the rarest perceive through illusion, and become untouchable. So decide, will you continue reacting to existence, or will you begin authoring it? Study these mechanisms. Practice the silences, perfect detachment. Permit the world to believe it moves freely while its cadence follows your pulse. If you elect this path, tread softly. Power observed is power forfeited. And never forget, the figure who appears least threatening frequently wields the keenest intellect. Become that intellect. Become the stillness around which chaos organizes. Your maneuver commences the instant explanation ceases and observation begins.